Good evening and welcome to the Ogden City Redevelopment Agency special meeting for April 23rd, 2013. Let the roll call reflect that all board members are present. And before we begin, we'd just like to welcome Commissioner
Chair, the recording hasn't started yet. Could we hold on just a minute? It's like starting the basketball game before the clock starts.
Before the clock starts.
For these guys over here. Okay, we're ready. We're on.
Let me start over. Okay. Good evening. Welcome to the Ogden City Redevelopment Agency special meeting for April 23rd, 2013. Let the roll call reflect that all board members are present. And we'd like to extend a welcome to Commissioner Bell. Welcome. And now I'll turn the time over to Vice Chair Garner for a special Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you. We have an honor today to have Commander John Ott from the American Legion Post 9, and he will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. So, John, if you'll come up.
Follow me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. And now if you would join with us in a moment of silence. Thank you. Next on the agenda is public hearing for the Trackline Economic Development Project Area. Mr. Cooper? There he is.
Mr. Johnson, members of the board, thank you for your time this evening. As you know, we've spent quite a few months now in the development and preparation of what is called the Trackline Economic Development Project Area. The middle of last year, the board adopted a resolution authorizing RDA staff to create a draft plan for the Trackline Economic Development Project Area. Under state statute, we proceeded with that draft plan and met with the Taxing Entity Commission of the agency on March 27th and subsequently received an approval of the budget portion of the draft plan. And it's our pleasure this evening to come before you and present the final plan for the Trackline Economic Development Project and present before you the proposed resolution 2013-8, which adopts that plan if you so choose. I've got some information here that I'd like to share that would give you a little bit of background and some insight into what the plan consists of. The identified project area is located in the West Ogden community. If you took an aerial photo over the location, you would find this map. Presently, the area is bounded by the UP Rail to the east, the Weber River to more immediately to the east and to the north. This black line here is the city boundaries next to unincorporated county here. And then you also have 24th Street. So those are the major physical boundaries of the project area. The project area consists of this location through here, which could be generally described as the old stockyard facility. Historically, it was used as the Union stockyards for a long time. The project area is 123 acres. There's 121 parcels located in that boundary that I just described. Again, physical boundaries are the river, 24th Street, the UP rail yard, and the city limits to the west. Out of those 121 parcels, most of those parcels are residential. Again, if we go back here, most of those residential parcels are here. There are a few residential parcels here, and we'll discuss those more in a moment. Although most of the parcels are residential, the large amount of space is comprised of commercial use. So all of this area here is zoned commercial and is historically commercial use parcels. If you were to look at a plat, this is how the plat shapes out in terms of the parcels, the interior streets. Here's 24th Street down here. This would be B, and then Exchange right through here. So this is how the parcel map lays out, and again, the red line is the boundary that, that surrounds the project area. A look back into what this area was and consisted of in the past. Again, as I mentioned, historically it was known and used as the Ogden Stockyards. The Ogden Stockyards have a storied history, one of the largest and most productive and successful stockyards in the early part of the century west of the Mississippi. It existed that way for a long time. Some of you might remember that location being used as the Coliseum and a skating rink. It burned down in the recent past, and so since that time, the abandoned stockyard use, the abandoned Coliseum and dilapidated building that subsequently was torn down really sat for quite a period of time. Businesses that were located in that area vacated, and there was a major decline in economic development, which then bred some blight and some unsatisfactory conditions of the infrastructure there. In 1989, part of this staff here revisited that area and determined that it could be brought back into productive use and be used as an industrial park. And so this idea of what we're presenting today in the final plan is not a new idea. It was conceived in 1989. It was developed around a company who chose to, or selected to locate their company in Ogden. And this process was followed pursuant to the law then, and an RDA redevelopment area was established in 1989. Since that time, there has been no debt issued against that area. There has been no assets created. There's been generally no activity within the Golden Spike redevelopment area since it was created. So as we looked at this project area with fresh eyes, we realized that a new type of mechanism was required to be created in order to generate the simulation and the activity that we deem necessary to create the jobs and to bring the businesses. The existing RDA project area and the mechanism and the law that it was created under was insufficient for our needs now. And so as part of this process, creating the draft plan and coming before you tonight for presentation, we are contemplating, in the event that it's necessary, the termination and dissolution of the Golden Spike RDA. This is that same map that I showed you before, but with a little bit different information. There is some phasing information here. It does show you somewhat of what the preliminary development plan could be. It shows you some interior street realignment, which is here at B Avenue. We've contemplated realigning B Avenue to allow for some additional truck access. We anticipate that the uses that are currently here and that the uses that would come here would create some heavier truck traffic, and so any improvements that we make to the road facilities and infrastructure would need to be able to carry that additional load. And so we've contemplated looking at the realignment of B Avenue as well as this roundabout to provide better circulation. This roundabout can be located a little closer to the historical Ogden Exchange building. It could be in the center. So this actual location here that you're looking at isn't necessarily the final location of the roundabout. It's just in general terms. We do anticipate having to create some new interior streets and also the upgrade of Exchange Road, which would include new pavement, new underground utilities, sidewalk, curb and gutter, things like that. All things that are not presently located in the project area. So we see that as an improvement. All of this is really designed to increase traffic flow in the project area as well as out of the project area. It's also meant to help with pedestrian access and safety. We anticipate a number of jobs being created as part of this project area, and so that would mean more people coming to the area and working throughout the day. And so there's a large need to create some additional infrastructure and improvements, and we've addressed that in the plan. So again, this hatching is just a phased map as we anticipate it. We look at this larger area really being the bulk of the project area as being our first phase. This would be where we have the largest ability to, or the greatest ability to facilitate large users in contiguous spaces. And so we've looked at this as our first phase. A key part of this project area is this area here, which is on this map identified as a transload facility. As you may know, a transload facility allows rail cars to come in, be offloaded onto the site, to asphalt or to concrete, and then users both in the park and around the park would be able to come to this location, pick up those containers in their own vehicle, and take that back to the last mile, as they call it, back to their facility. And so in terms of marketability, this is a great asset to the project, and it would allow us to entertain companies that are in need of rail service but don't need it to their back door. It would also give us the ability to serve the larger market because it doesn't just accommodate the use here within the project area. It would be used regionally for those folks that need transloading support. We're in partnership with Union Central Rail Yard and also Patriot Rail, who owns this short line track that comes off the UP's main line. And so our partnership with them would include an agreement to develop the track, own the track, manage the track, and really handle the transload facility as a separate part of the development. Let me point out that this development is, in general, not a city development. We have, and I'll describe this a little bit more shortly, but this is a developer-driven project. It's a private project with agency incentive and facilitation. So the property will not be owned by the agency. The management of the project will not be managed by the agency. We would be a partner in the facilitation of it, and then it would be very much a private development. And that's important for a couple reasons that I'll mention in a minute. So there's a few things in the final plan that I'd like to cover that I think are of most importance. Number one is the selection criteria. How did we get to this point, and why did we choose this area for these reasons? I mentioned this a little bit before. Number one is the deterioration of the area in general. It's been happening for a long period of time. It's been listed, ironically, in the private market, real estate market, for a long, long time, and there has been zero to little private interest from developers or property purchasers or anybody that would have interest in developing this site. And there's a reason for that. There's a lot of impediments to development that can't be overcome in the private markets. Hence the reason why we have chosen the area to add public incentive to. There's no other way around some of those impediments unless there's equity dollars that are able to underwrite those things. So that was our number one criteria. The second selection criteria was the implementation of a plan. So the location really lends itself to be very successful in this type of a use. There's access to 24th Street, which will get you to I-15, access to the river, access to downtown, a large area of land that's easily assembled and combined. So those are the two major reasons why this area was selected, probably both in 1989 and also today as we've revisited it. Another important part of the final plan would be the current conditions of the project area. Right now we have a variety of mixes, including housing, manufacturing, distribution, and small businesses. Again, I mentioned housing is largely up closer to 24th Street and really can act as a separate phase if and when it was developed through the private developer mechanism. There are some buildings on the property now, some that are in productive use. There are some, most of the buildings are not in productive use. They sit dilapidated and require removal for the most part. There are some residential homes, mostly on C Avenue and adjacent to that road. And then again, the bulk of them would be on up against 24th Street. And one thing in particular, there is a historic building there. It's not a historic in terms of being on any register, but it is historic in nature, and our plan is to adopt that building, so to speak, and renovate it and use it, put it back into productive use as the administrative building or some other type of use that would be compatible with the park.
So we won't do that, but that would be whoever develops it would have to do
Correct.
that as a condition of the development.
Yeah, and we would definitely be a part of that in terms of getting it on the register, historical tax credits, some of the things that we typically do anyway. Again, current conditions include utilities that are there but are typically underutilized, overused, old, just inadequate to serve not only the businesses that are there, but the thought of any new businesses as well. We do have some inefficient and unsafe traffic conditions there with the width of the road and the size of the vehicles going up and down the road, the speed limit, those type of things that need to be addressed. And again, insufficient circulation for pedestrian because of the lack of sidewalks and crosswalks and things like that. So all of these things have been addressed in the plan and would be rectified through the redevelopment.
Brandon, when they do the interchange for 24th Street, are they going to be widening 24th Street? Is that going to impact the neighborhood? And are we talking curb and gutter that the state's going to do with this new, with the new plan, or what?
That is definitely a separate process that's being done through the state. My understanding is that that there are plans that would include the interchange upgrade as well as the possibility of 24th Street being widened. And so if that was the case through the state, then there would be some impact to those residential homes and to the project area, because B Avenue is a connection into 24th Street.
Yeah, that's
and so
what
that
I
could
wondered.
likely be warranted to have a light there, depending on traffic. And so some of those things are unknown at this point. We do have a very good relationship with UDOT, and so we're working with them.
But we are taking that into account. That's
Right.
what I'm.
We've
yeah.
been part of their study and their process, and so
Okay.
we've looked at both of these projects together.
Okay.
So make sure they're compatible.
If this project is approved, would we start immediately on B Avenue, or is that, or would we go into the project and put in the other streets in that aspect there?
The realignment of B Avenue, specifically to your question, is still a conceptual idea, so there would be more study that would need to happen to determine if the realignment of B is indeed something that's warranted and what that new alignment would be. But in general, the answer to your question is yes. The next step after final acquisition of the property would be for the developer to start to go in, clear the land, and start making improvements to the site and to the utilities in preparation of new business. So again, I mentioned that one of the reasons why we chose this site is because of some of the positive amenities that it does have. Proximity to I-15, access to the rail, which is a huge benefit to our marketing efforts, and also the access to the river and to the downtown. Those are two key elements. Right now we have 4 zoning conditions. North of Exchange is zoned M1. That's south of Exchange is M1, north of Exchange is M2, and then you do see the R15 again up closer to 24th Street, and there is some CP3, which is regional commercial, along B Avenue. And so as development plans are solidified, zoning would be changed that would be consistent with development plans. It would happen through the approved process and would be consistent with our general plan within the city as well. So moving on from current conditions, another aspect of the plan is development objectives. So in the plan we've stated 5, there's actually I believe 12 items, but I pulled out 5 that I think are of most important in terms of what we're trying to achieve through development of this project area. Number 1 is to encourage and assist economic development and create jobs. So taking a location of our city that's heavily blighted and entirely underutilized and bringing that back into positive production where jobs are created and business happens. There are some environmental conditions there that are unsatisfactory, and so through development we would be remediating or the developer would be remediating some of those environmental deficiencies, one of those being what's happening to the river. The river improvements is not part of what we've contemplated in this plan, but is a natural consequence of what would happen with the area. The river will have to be dealt with.
You know, and you mentioned the river, and another environmental deficiency down in that area is just from the heavy trucks, air.
Mm-hmm.
You know, pollution is a big issue in and around that area.
It is, yeah.
I'll touch on these again in a minute.
So would the developer be required to remove the contaminated soil if there's any in that area then?
Yes.
Or would we as a city?
Well, we would partner with him in certain ways. We currently have EPA brownfields grants that would help in supporting the cost of some of that remediation, but in general, environmental remediation would be a condition to develop the property, and that would lie with the developer with our assistance.
Okay.
So we have some mechanisms to help that, which we've used elsewhere in the city also. Again, provide for upgraded public infrastructure and provide for the strengthening of property tax and income tax base as we bring in new business and create new jobs. Then those are natural intended consequences. And then also improve the compatibility between the uses in this project area as well as the local community. Right now, it's a location that is undesirable if you're a resident living in and around West Ogden or around the project area. And so we hope to bring in uses with the understanding that this is an industrial park, this is a business park, but we do hope to bring in uses that are compatible to the overall community at large. We also have identified some design objectives that are part of this final plan. Number one is to provide an attractive urban community while preserving the historic elements. We are very excited about what this area used to be, and we definitely do not want to lose that as we go forward in the future. And so there's some steps we've taken and will continue to take to preserve historic elements, especially the building that I mentioned previously. Open spaces and access to the river are important for obvious reasons. As part of the final development plans, as we work with the developer, open space will be a requirement. Being able to circulate through the site from a pedestrian perspective will also be important and required from the plan so that you can move from a building down to the river and back. There'll be access to trails, both on the site and off site. And so all of those things will be contemplated as we finalize a development plan with the developer.
Speaking of trails, the trail, it kind of looks like it skirts inside the development. How's that going to work?
We anticipate to connect that, and so you'll be able to get across the river from inside the project area to the overall general trail system of the city. And so we definitely do not want to isolate that. We want you to be able to go from your building onto the trail system, up to the canyon if you so desire, and back on a lunch break.
Oh, it's going to be protected and improved.
Right.
Great.
And then again, coordinated landscape design, that goes hand in hand with the other two, and improved lighting, safety, and access, because we do anticipate bringing bodies, humans, down to this area. And so we need to make it a safe place. As part of the final plan, we contemplate how to bring to pass this type of work, and we've identified two parties, private developers, which we're working with now. We have a couple of groups that we have not made a final agreement with, so we're not at liberty to discuss those deals at this point, but we are working with private developers, and we also are working with private landowners. We give them the opportunity to make the improvements that they see fit for their private business according to the redevelopment plan, and so we are currently working with them as well.
So would there be a standard by which they would have to submit their plans for their private land to develop in that area?
Correct. In addition to the normal approval process of the city, there would be an added layer that would include design guidelines and possible CC&Rs that would require improvements to meet those standards as well.
You know, on the previous slide, you mentioned the private owners. And I know that, you know, you and I have talked about some of the homeowners in that area. So the developer will be the one negotiating with these homeowners with buying their property or their homes? And
yes, that's a good point. So again, this is not a city-owned project, so there is no eminent domain that is associated with what we're proposing tonight. It's an economic development area, and per state statute, there is no allowance for eminent domain. With this being a private development with no city leverage, so to speak, then any development that will happen between the natural negotiations of a developer and a private property owner, be it residential or commercial. So there is no forcing, there is no taking in the traditional sense. If development will happen, it will happen through two parties that voluntarily come to the table to negotiate a deal.
What if the homeowners don't want to sell their homes?
Then they have no obligation to sell the homes.
Even if the developer owns a certain percentage of the development, there's
Correct.
nothing to require them to sell their homes.
There's absolutely nothing that requires homeowners to sell their homes. Again, it would be a function of a normal negotiation where the developer would approach the private landowner, negotiate a price, execute the deal, vacate the premises, those kind of things. Also, as part of the final plan is our financial analysis. It's briefly summarized here. We've projected, based on the improvements that we anticipate, a taxable value at the end of the 20-year project period of $52 million, which means that the projected tax increment value back to the agency would be $13 million. Working with the taxing entity committee, we've received approval for use of $10,290,342 of that available tax increment. That $10 million would be used to incentivize development, either directly to the developer or indirectly through other means. And the tax increment period being proposed is 20 years. And that's a summary of the final plan that's before you. Again, we've been working on this a long time. We have fielded quite a few questions from folks that live in and around the area. Most of those questions have been around what the development plans consist of. A lot of homeowners have called, and we've discussed similar questions as what you've asked tonight in terms of what happens to my property. Am I required to sell? Again, let me reiterate that there is no reason for any single property owner to sell other than being a volunteer basis.
Let me just make a few comments.
Sure.
You know, like we've mentioned, an RDA has existed in this area for a long time. And so even, voting to change the name of the RDA isn't changing that area very much. And what my point wants to be is the current need in that area. We touched on some of them briefly, but if we really want to make this area attractive to a developer, there's some current needs that we have to address, and we've been talking about many of those. One of them is working with the county. I'm glad Commissioner Bell is here today. I know he's heard or received some of this information, but we have the transfer station where we have to work in conjunction with the county to improve some of the trash and other things that are, loads uncovered and things that are on this road. They've got some great signs posted saying this is what will happen if you don't cover your loads, but we have to work with the county to enforce that and help with that. And I know we're not, doing the transfer station. I mentioned the air pollution and stuff, and it's just some of the trucks and others that come down in that area, idling and stuff. We've tried to, encourage anti-idling in many aspects, but I think this would be something that we can work with businesses currently to improve that area. And then speed along Exchange Road. Well, we've had police officers going down there on occasion, but probably not enough to really decrease some of that speed for some of those residents, especially that live on C Avenue. And just in general, garbage that just gets left. We have a recycling company, a junkyard, a transfer station, so it tends to get that kind of material, but it shouldn't be left on the roads. And so my request to the city is, we may be seeking developers, but we need to work with, the county and those businesses to improve that area, just in general, because it's what's attributing to some of that deterioration.
I fully agree that there are, and we fielded some similar questions as you bring up now. There are current businesses in operation down there, and those do have an existing current impact to the area. We've heard some of those questions. We've made some short-term improvements to help with the situation that you've described. For instance, we are working with the police department to get a speed sign that would help you identify your speed and potentially slow down. We will continue to work with the county on enforcement of their rules in terms of covering loads and things like that. I think in general, the unfortunate case is when you have an area that's kind of out of mind, out of sight, then it doesn't get treated over the long term as it might if it was an area that received some attention. And so we hope by bringing development to the area, although we will be increasing traffic and increasing productivity down there, we'll balance that with the improvements necessary to help make it a overall general improvement. And so that's our goal by identifying this location, is to actually drive some of that impacting negative use out by bringing in productive uses and productive impact. But we are working with city staff and county staff to make some short-term improvements.
Okay.
Appreciate your comment.
Thank you.
Brandon, you mentioned that it's a private project, but could you just briefly outline again the responsibilities of the developer and the responsibilities that the city has with this project?
Again, one of our major responsibilities would be to create a mechanism such as the Economic Development Project Area, which allows us to receive tax increment as the agency and then gives us the flexibility to convey that increment in ways that would support the development, whether that's directly to the developer or to infrastructure improvements, things like that. And so our major role, both now and in the future, will be to create that mechanism and to be that conduit of revenue, so to speak.
That's the revenue side of the project then.
Right. In terms of other participation, we would adopt our traditional role as a city in terms of the regulatory oversight, planning, zoning, building codes, things like that. All of that would be our role. And then in general, we would participate in making sure that the development guidelines and criteria of the plan are being carried forward. So we would work with the developer to make sure our design objectives and our development objectives are being met, that any design guidelines and CC&Rs that are applied to the project area are being adhered to. And so it's very much a long-term process, a long-term relationship with the developer. And as the development happens and stabilizes, our role in that relationship will diminish.
What about the developer? What responsibilities does he have?
Well, the developer, his main responsibility is to help design the project and to capitalize the project. And so their main role is to bring both equity and/or debt to the project area to facilitate the design and development objectives that we've created in the plan. So choosing the right developer is key. They have to have the capacity. They have to have the same vision that we do. We've gone through a couple for that reason, because we realize that not everyone has our vision, nor do they have the capacity needed to carry a project like this out. And so we're working with those trusted partners that we feel will be a long-term benefit to the area, that won't come in and do things incrementally, but can have the capacity to carry off the whole project area. In terms of industrial parks, it's not a large park. Overall, it's 122 acres, but developable acres are much less than that. And so absorption could happen in a much quicker pace than, say, a 1,400-acre park like BDO is.
But we don't have a developer at this time.
No, we do not have a contract with the developer at this time. Yeah, we anticipate that to happen. This was a key part of the contract. Obviously, entering into a contract had some conditions to it on the developer side, and one of those conditions is the availability of the tax increment. And so once we get through this process, we'll have an idea of if that tax increment is available or not, and then we can move down through our negotiation process.
And the developer would be responsible for the improvements in the area then?
Correct. There could be some additional participation based on how the economics work out in terms of public infrastructure, so roads, utilities, sidewalks, things like that. There could be a request from the developer for additional participation above and beyond the tax increment incentive by the city. So the increment is derived by virtue of the agency. The developer could come to the city and request some additional funding sources, and we would just have to deal with that as they come in, like we do on a case-by-case scenario with other projects.
So if this passes, would we require whatever developer ends up doing it to maintain access to the river, perhaps provide some additional open space and protection to create a buffer between the industrial park and the river?
So we would enter into a development agreement with the developer that would set out all of that criteria. And so in terms of performance on their side, they would have to meet those objectives that we set out.
Brandon, I know the city's interested in preserving the historic structure out there. Is there any sort of mechanism in place in case the developer doesn't share that interest?
Mm-hmm. Currently, all the property that we have acquired is in the name of the agency in one way or another. So we're not we're not out there exposed to the whims of a third party. So in the event that something was to happen that the third party partner was not able to perform, then we would be able to retain that ownership, specifically of that building, and especially. That's one part that would be a condition of the development agreement. Any other questions? Great. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
This is a public hearing. We will now receive public input regarding the Trackland Economic Development Area. We ask those to come forward and state your name and your address for the record.
My name is Bert Smith from Far West and Slaterville. My home was in Slaterville. And I'm involved in this land. This is a land that I've been acquainted with since I was 4 years old. We used to bring cattle and hogs down here 90 years ago. And I've always had a little feeling for this property, and that's why one of the reasons I bought it, we used it for storage. And one of my thoughts, and maybe this could be answered here by the planners, they're holding the funds up for the first 180 days. Now they've gone into the second 180 days, which will be 360 days, holding the money up, a payment. Well, in the meantime, the taxes should be released. We have not been able to store the items on there that we draw the rent on. They've been taken off, and so we're out the rental fees. We're faced with the taxes, and there should be some answers to that. And maybe the tax assessor can answer those things. The rent is, the tax is very high. One of those lots is $4,000 a year. They run them on, M2 runs a pretty high tax. And but to hold the funds up when they have the funds is something that needs to be answered. 360 days is too long to hold these funds up. we need to know why they can't break those loose.
So just to clarify something, maybe, we're not always aware of property transactions that go on. Has the city, does the city have a contract with you to purchase your property? Is that the issue?
There's a contract, but that's just in case they need it.
Okay.
Well, you know, you can play that game too far out. You know, it's good to be plied on one end of the rope, but the other end of the rope is abused. There's got to be some fairness in the middle, and it's not answered.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. We'll see if we can get someone to meet with you after and get some answers for you.
I didn't hear you.
We'll try to get someone to meet with you and get some answers for you.
Thank you.
You.
Seeing no movement. Oh, I see some.
Just pull it down a little bit. Yep. I have some questions. If you're going to...
Can you just tell us your name?
Okay. Steve Vargo, I live on F Avenue. Okay, if you put this thing in, it's going to increase the traffic on 24th Street exponentially. What are you going to do with all the truck traffic coming out of F Avenue now that's having trouble getting in there and out of there? We have trucks that go up there to that plant and load flour 8 or 10 hours a day. They're having trouble getting in on to 24th Street because of all the traffic now. And if you add more traffic, what are they going to do? They're going to be held up there for a long time trying to get out there on 24th. How are we going to go get this settled?
Well, you know, again, you know, we'll see what we can do to help find some answers for you.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Seeing no further activity, I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion for Board Member Gochner to close the public hearing and a second from Board Member Heyer. This is a voice vote. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chair, I wondered if Brandon could briefly outline the timeline for this project. Do you have a particular dates in place by which you want to accomplish or get started on your project?
Yes, good question. As I mentioned before, the mechanism of the tax increment is key to the kind of the rest of the process, and so we have some milestones set. We don't have a specific plan because we didn't know the outcome of today's meeting. The next milestone would be to close on the property that has been assembled. If I may address Mr. Smith's concerns, we've employed a third-party agent as our acquisition agent to go forth and secure some of the properties through options and purchase contracts. And we've also done that on our own in a couple of scenarios. And so Mr. Smith is part of the group of property owners that have been very willing and gracious to work with us in terms of our timeline and being patient. And so our first step would be to secure the partner and the funds to close, which would happen this year, and per the contracts that we have. And then after that, we would have a more specific development time frame, which would go into next year. So our goal in terms of milestones is to be actually turning dirt, so to speak, sometime next year.
Mr. Cooper, could you also address the issue with the legal description and the amendment that's required to the plan before adoption?
Yes, so what you have in front of you in terms of the packet would be an amended version of the plan, which includes the updated and accurate legal description. In order for the plan to be accurate in terms of state law, we needed an accurate and precise legal description. That was not available when the packet went out. We've amended the plan, and so now the motion that you would take today, if I understand it correctly, would be to take action on the amended plan, which includes that new legal description. Any other questions?
Well, with that, Chair Blair, I would move that we amend the Trackline Economic Development Project Plan to include the complete legal description at Exhibit A and adopt the resolution 2013-8 as amended.
I second it.
Okay, we have a motion from Board Member Heyer to adopt 2013-8 as amended, which would include the Trackline Economic Development Project Plan and the legal description in Exhibit A, and a second, is that right? And a second from Board Member Stevens. This is a roll call vote.
Board Member Gochner?
Aye.
Board Member Heyer?
Aye.
Board Member Stevens?
Aye.
Board Member Van Hooser?
Aye.
Board Member Wicks?
Aye.
Vice Chair Garner?
Aye.
Chair Blair?
Aye, that passes.
I'd like just to make a comment. I did bring up several of the concerns, and many of these are concerns that are brought up with citizens, but if we could really, again, just work with the county and city to help these businesses and residents just to stay within, code and to make it safe, and I would appreciate that.
We've notified the county tonight.
Yep. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, the two concerns that citizens brought up, who would they meet with administration then?
Mr. Cooper and Mr. Kostopoulos will meet with them outside.
Okay.
But it'll have to be after the portion of the city council meeting that covers the same item.
Next up is reports from administration for the termination of the Golden Spike redevelopment project area. Mr. Cooper again.
Welcome back. As a result of the previous action just taken, it's necessary for us to terminate and dissolve the existing redevelopment project area that's in place over roughly the same geographic area. And so before you tonight, you have proposed resolution 2013-7, which does indeed terminate and dissolve that project area which was established in 1989. There are no assets, there are no liabilities associated with the project area. There has not been any increment received or committed, and so we feel that it's proper to propose this evening. Any questions? Thank you.
If there's no further discussion, I'll go ahead and make a motion that we adopt proposed resolution 2013-7.
I'll second it.
We have a motion from Board Member Gochner to adopt proposed resolution 2013-7 and a second from Board Member Van Hooser. This is a roll call vote.
Board Member Heyer?
Aye.
Board Member Stevens?
Aye.
Board Member Van Hooser?
Aye.
Board Member Wicks?
Aye.
Board Member Gochner?
Aye.
Vice Chair Garner?
Aye.
Chair Blair?
Aye, that passes. Next is public comments. This is an opportunity to address the board regarding your concerns or ideas for the Ogden Redevelopment Agency. City Council concerns should be expressed during a City Council meeting. Please state your name and address for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Yours. Come on up. Come on up to the microphone, please.
I live on 684 West 24th Street. I was wondering how, first of all, this would affect the tax rates for people who live in the area, affected area. So are they basically going to stay the same, or are our tax rates going to go up?
We will gather that information and get someone to meet with you and address those concerns.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any comments from the RDA Executive Director?
None tonight, thank you.
Okay. Other RDA staff? And board members?
We want to address the tax issue. I mean, I think it's a pretty simple answer. I mean, and I'll maybe take a stab at it. Your tax rate won't go up. There is the possibility, because of the development, that your property may be worth more money, so the valuation could increase, but it's not going to do anything to change the certified tax rate that's charged on your county, on the county or the city charges, or any other entity.
Isn't it the county that sets the rate then? No.
They don't set the rate, but they set the valuation.
Yeah.
We set the rate.
Okay.
For all of the entities that are taxing entities within the county set the rate, which would be us, the mosquito abatement district, the sewer, the schools, library, any bond issues, all of that.
Any other comments from board members?
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion to adjourn from Board Member Gochner and a second from Board Member Heyer. This is a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
That passes. Just as a reminder, a regular city council meeting will be held in the council chambers immediately following the redevelopment agency special meeting, and a city council work session will follow.